Airport officer disrespects black woman. Wait till her father. The airline CEO shows up. Have you ever felt the weight of 1,000 eyes watching you? Not because you did anything wrong, but simply because of who you are. Imagine landing after a long flight exhausted and ready to go home, only to be stopped by an officer who questions your very presence. But what happens when that officer doesn't realize the woman he's challenging isn't just anyone, she's the daughter of the powerful owner of the airline you just flew with? This is a story about quiet strength, resilience, and the unexpected ways power can shift when you refuse to be invisible. Stay with us because what you're about to hear will change how you see courage and justice. He thought he was just flexing authority on another young black traveler until she calmly told him, "I'm calling my father." What he didn't know was her dad owns the airline she just flew in on. Have you ever landed somewhere familiar and still felt out of place? Aaliyah Harper had just touched down at LAX after a grueling 4.5-hour flight from Hartsfield-Jackson in Atlanta. Her head throbbed from stale cabin air and recycled chatter. Unlike everyone else rushing off the plane, she had learned to move slow when everyone else sped up. That's when you notice the details, the glances, the weight behind certain looks. She adjusted the strap on her cream leather duffel, stepped through the jet bridge, and followed the steady stream of passengers toward baggage claim. Her mother, Monica Harper, had texted during the layover, "I'll be in the pickup lane. Call when you're at the curb. Love you, A." Aaliyah smiled just thinking about her. She wore a sand-colored two-piece knit set and crisp white sneakers, effortless, not showy. Her braids were tied up neatly with a gold cuff around one, just like her dad liked when she was younger. It made her look focused. A first-class ticket was still tucked in the sleeve of her passport. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, just comfortable in her own skin like she always was. But airports have a strange way of making you feel watched, especially if you're not the expected type. She felt it before she saw him. The man had a stiff stance and a badge that gleamed more than necessary. Officer Dawson Reed posted up just past the first checkpoint. He didn't scan crowds, he scanned individuals. Eyes narrowed, jaw clenched, looking like he was waiting for someone to mess up. Aaliyah wasn't in a rush. She checked her phone and kept walking, but she could feel his eyes glued to her. "Excuse me, miss?" came the clipped, direct voice. Aaliyah turned. "Yes. Can you step over here for me?" She blinked, confused. "For what random screening?" No wand, no scanner, no actual screening equipment nearby, just him and a small podium. Aaliyah hesitated. "I already cleared security in Atlanta. I'm just trying to get to baggage claim." "Ma'am, I asked you to step over here." His tone sharpened like a blade drawn just an inch further. She glanced around. People were passing through without pause. A young white guy in a Dodgers jersey strolled by with earbuds in and a huge duffel, not noticing them. A woman in business heels barely glanced, but eyes were creeping in from every angle, some curious, some cautious, most uninterested, but all aware. Aaliyah walked the few feet over, keeping calm. Shoulders squared. "Is there something specific you need to see?" "Just answering some questions," he replied. She pulled her boarding pass from her bag and handed it over Flight 422 from ATL First Class Seat 2D. He looked at it longer than necessary. "First class," he repeated. He didn't hand it back right away. Aaliyah tilted her head. "Is there a problem?" "No problem. Just doesn't add up." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What doesn't add up?" "You," he said, handing it back slowly. "You don't exactly look like our typical first-class passenger." The pause between each word felt intentional, measured heavy. Aaliyah's chest tensed, but her face didn't flinch. "And what does a typical first-class passenger look like to you?" He smirked a smug little twitch at the corner of his mouth like he was waiting for her to get loud to make a scene. But she didn't. She slid the ticket back into her passport and looked him straight in the eye. "I'm going to baggage claim now. I didn't say you could leave. You didn't say why I had to stop." He stepped closer. Not enough to threaten, just enough to assert something invisible, something that hung heavy in the air between them. "I'm asking the questions." Aaliyah let a full second pass. "I'm asking if you have a reason to detain me." His brow twitched. He didn't answer. He wasn't used to being checked, especially not like that. But Aaliyah wasn't scared. She was calculating, and the next thing she did would change everything. There's a look people get when they realize control is slipping, and Officer Reed was wearing it now. She didn't move. She stood steady. Passport in one hand, phone in the other, thumb hovering just above the screen, not calling anyone yet, not reacting, just watching him with that same patience she learned from her father. The kind of patience that wasn't passive, it was power held in reserve. Reed shifted his stance. He wasn't done playing gatekeeper. "Where were you coming from?" he asked. "I told you, Atlanta. Purpose of the trip. Personal." "How long were you there?" Aaliyah kept her gaze even. "I was born there. I visit family every few months." He raised an eyebrow. "You have identification to confirm that?" "Like my ID, yes." She pulled out her California driver's license and handed it over. It was valid, clean, nothing questionable. But he still held it like he was doing her a favor by giving it back. "You always fly first class." "Not always." "My dad booked this one." He sniffed like he'd caught her in a lie. Must be nice. She didn't bite. He circled a little, not physically, but in his questions, asking the same things again, with slightly different words, as if trying to trip her up. He asked about her bags, her seat number, the time she boarded. He asked who picked her up in Atlanta, where she stayed when she booked the ticket. People were watching now, not a crowd, but enough. A woman near Starbucks paused long enough to make eye contact with Aaliyah, then quickly looked away when Reed turned his head. A baggage handler slowed down, pushing a cart of suitcases, pretending to check the tags. Aaliyah's voice stayed cool. She'd been taught to never match someone else's anger in public. That's how they flip the script on you. But inside her stomach burned. "What is this really about?" she asked finally. Reed smiled just barely. "Like I said, routine. No one else from my flight is getting questioned. You don't know that. I was one of the first off the plane. I watched them walk right past you. You're getting defensive. I'm asking you to explain what's going on." "That's not defensive, that's fair." He stepped in again, slightly closer. "You've got a little attitude. You've got a lot of assumptions." That hit not loudly, but sharply. Reed stared at her for a beat. His jaw tensed. His voice dropped. "Look, lady, I don't care how much that ticket cost or who paid for it. People who act like they're better than everyone else usually have something to hide." Aaliyah almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so tired, so weak. "Better than everyone else," she repeated. "You don't know anything about me." He ignored her. "I see this a lot, fly and act entitled, mouth off when asked basic questions. You think I haven't seen this play out?" She was done. Without saying a word, she unlocked her phone and tapped on a name in her favorites. Reed raised an eyebrow, amused. "Who you calling?" She looked him dead in the eye. "My father." "Oh, sure. Let me guess, lawyer, Congressman, CEO Aaliyah didn't answer." The phone rang twice. Then she picked up. "Zeet, you good?" His voice was calm, smooth, and steady. She felt it wrap around her like armor. "Daddy," she said softly but clearly, "I need you at Terminal 4 Southwest baggage claim level. There's an officer here who thinks I don't belong." Pause. Silence. "I'm on my way," he said. Nothing more. He didn't ask questions. He didn't yell. He just knew. Aaliyah ended the call and slid the phone into her back pocket. Reed chuckled. "That's supposed to scare me." She raised one eyebrow. "You'll find out soon enough." But what neither of them knew yet was just how quickly things were about to shift and who exactly was walking into the building. 5 minutes can feel like an hour when silence thickens the air. Officer Dawson Reed shifted his weight again. Something in him had started to itch. The kind of discomfort that doesn't come from being challenged outright, but from the quiet certainty someone else holds when they're not afraid of you. Aaliyah stood where she was, not smug, not rattled, just still. Passengers kept trickling past. A man in khakis and a too-tight polo glanced at the scene, then back at his phone. A mother pulled her daughter a little closer. The atmosphere wasn't hostile. It was cautious, like everyone was waiting to see who was going to make the next move. Reed crossed his arms. "You always this dramatic." Aaliyah didn't even blink. "You always this wrong," he chuckled, but it didn't land. The confidence he'd come in with was fraying. The joke fell flat. A supervisor in a gray blazer stepped out from behind the glass doors leading to the administrative offices. Her name tag read, Supervisor Elena Cruz. She scanned the scene for half a second and walked briskly toward them. "Everything all right here?" she asked. "Not casual, professional, tight." "I've got it under control," Reed replied without looking at her. "I wasn't asking you," Cruz said. That was the first crack. Reed turned, clearly caught off guard. "This is routine protocol." Passenger was acting evasive. "She wasn't acting evasive," Cruz said, cutting him off. "She was standing in line with her documents in hand. I just reviewed the footage from 2 minutes ago." Aaliyah didn't speak. She didn't need to. Cruz turned to her. "Ma'am, do you feel unsafe?" Aaliyah met her eyes. "No, just tired. And being stopped without cause isn't exactly new to me." Cruz's jaw flexed just slightly. "I'm sorry you were made to feel like this. If you'd like to file a report, I can escort you to the office." Aaliyah nodded slowly. "Not yet. My father's on the way. I'll speak with him first." Something about that sentence made Cruz pause. "Your father." But before Aaliyah could answer, 2 black SUVs rolled up to the curb just beyond the sliding glass doors, both parked in the zone usually reserved for shuttles and VIPs. The passenger side door of the lead SUV opened. A tall man in a navy suit stepped out, dark skin gray at the temples, calm in the shoulders. His face was unreadable, but his walk said everything, purpose in every step. Not aggressive, not arrogant, just assured. A man who'd spent his whole life walking into rooms that didn't expect him but leaving with them changed. Aaliyah exhaled. Reed narrowed his eyes. "Who is that?" Cruz muttered. "That's Jonathan Harper," Reed asked, suddenly less sure of himself. "Jonathan Harper." Cruz nodded. "Owner of WestJet Air and I believe one of the 5 major stakeholders in this terminal." Reed opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. "You're telling me she's his daughter?" Harper entered through the glass doors like he'd done it 100 times. He didn't rush. He didn't scan the room for drama. He walked straight to his daughter. Aaliyah looked up and smiled just barely, but it was real. "Hey, Daddy." He kissed her forehead. "You all right? I'm fine now." Harper turned to Officer Reed. No hand extended, no formalities, just a slow, measured glance. "You're the one who stopped my daughter." Reed straightened his back. "Sir, I was following. I didn't ask what you thought you were doing," Harper said. His voice wasn't loud, but it dropped heavy. Supervisor Cruz stepped forward, hands clasped in front of her. "Mr. Harper, I apologize. This wasn't cleared. I've already requested footage. We'll open an internal review." He gave her a nod. "I'd like a full report by end of day, and someone from your office will speak with my legal team." Then he looked back at Reed. "You saw a young woman standing in line, dressed clean with a first-class ticket, and your instinct was to embarrass her. You picked the wrong daughter on the wrong day." Reed couldn't speak, not because he had nothing to say, but because nothing he said would help him now. But the day wasn't over. What came next would pull back the curtain on more than just one officer's mistake. There are people who make noise when they enter a room, then there are people who change the temperature just by standing in it. Jonathan Harper was the second kind. Airport staff began shifting as soon as they caught a glimpse of him. The front desk manager stood a little straighter. 2 TSA agents who'd been watching from the hallway turned and pretended to busy themselves with paperwork. Even the airport police captain Marcus Flynn suddenly moved at a different speed, trying to catch up to what had already started unfolding. Aaliyah stood still while her father spoke. His voice was even deliberate. He didn't raise it. He didn't have to. Reed had gone from smug to silent, his hands now tucked behind his back like a kid waiting to be scolded. Jonathan didn't yell. That would have been too easy and frankly too generous. He leaned slightly toward Reed. "Tell me what made you decide she was suspicious," he asked, calmly. Reed hesitated. She seemed evasive. "No," Jonathan replied. "She answered your questions clearly. Repeatedly. I didn't recognize her name on the manifest, because you don't read the manifest. You're not airline staff." Reed's mouth opened, then closed again. Jonathan didn't look angry. He looked bored, like he'd seen this movie 100 times and didn't need to sit through the ending. "You weren't doing your job," Jonathan said finally. "You were flexing your badge because you could, because you thought no one would care." The silence that followed filled every corner. Supervisor Cruz stepped forward gently. "Mr. Harper, I've already begun documenting the incident. I'll personally handle the follow-up." Jonathan nodded. "I'm sure you will. But let me be clear, I didn't come here for apologies." Her face tightened slightly. "Understood." Jonathan turned to Aaliyah. "Did he touch you?" "No." "Did he threaten you?" "No." "But he made you feel small." Aaliyah nodded. That was enough. Jonathan looked back at Reed. "You will not be working this terminal again. Whether you keep your badge, that's for your department. But here you're done." Reed's throat moved as he swallowed hard. "Sir, I'm not sir to you." A moment later, Captain Marcus Flynn stepped up. "Mr. Harper, I'll take it from here." Jonathan didn't even look at him. "Make sure you do." Flynn gestured to Reed. "Come with me." The officer hesitated just long enough to remind everyone he still believed in whatever authority he thought he had, but he followed. They disappeared behind a side door. For the first time in nearly 20 minutes, the air in the terminal began to breathe again. Cruz exhaled slowly. "She handled herself well." "She always does," Jonathan replied, not missing a beat. "She's had practice." Aaliyah glanced down. She didn't want praise. She wanted this not to be a pattern. Jonathan turned to her. "You ready?" She nodded. "Let's go." They began walking toward the exit. The crowd had thinned. Some people had filmed part of it, sure she saw one teenage boy lowering his phone a little too late, but no one said anything. The respect in the air wasn't loud. It was quiet, measured, like people knew something real had just happened, even if they couldn't name it. Outside, the sun had dipped low behind the parking structure, casting long shadows across the pavement. The SUVs were waiting. The driver opened the door, but Jonathan held out a hand. "Aaliyah," he said, "walk with me." They passed the car and kept walking down the sidewalk away from the noise. "I knew something was wrong the second I answered," he said softly. "I kept thinking maybe it would stop," she said. "But it was never about calm," he said. "I know you handled it better than I would have at your age." Aaliyah half smiled. "That's because you didn't teach me to yell. You taught me to aim." Jonathan gave a low laugh. "Well, seems like you hit your mark." The SUV's back seat was cool and quiet, a small bubble of peace as the world outside continued spinning. Aaliyah leaned back and looked out the tinted window, watching the terminal shrink behind them. It felt further away than it actually was. Jonathan sat beside her phone in hand. He wasn't texting. He was scanning emails, fingers moving fast, eyes darting. "What's going to happen to him?" Aaliyah asked quietly. Jonathan didn't look up. "Officer Reed." She nodded. "That depends on his department. He might get suspended, maybe reassigned. But he won't be back at LAX. Aaliyah exhaled. "That's it." He finally turned toward her. "You wanted more?" She crossed her arms. "Part of me wanted him to be embarrassed the way he tried to embarrass me." Jonathan nodded slowly. "I understand that." But I'm not here to give people what they gave us. I'm here to make sure they don't do it again. Aaliyah was quiet for a moment. That's not justice. That's management. It's both, he replied. Sometimes cleaning house is how you start fixing the foundation. She didn't argue, but her jaw tightened. It wasn't about revenge. It was about respect, and she hated how quickly it was taken from her by someone who had no right to question it in the first place. As the SUV merged onto Century Boulevard, Jonathan's phone buzzed. He answered. Go ahead. Pause. Have legal reach out before noon tomorrow. Pause again. Yes. The statement goes out tonight. Tell them to keep it simple, nothing performative. He hung up and looked back at Aaliyah. Your story's already circulating. Someone filmed it, I figured she said. They didn't get the whole thing, just the tail end. You standing your ground. Me showing up. People will turn it into something it wasn't. He shrugged. Let them. The truth is simple enough. Back at the airport, Officer Dawson Reed sat stiffly across from two internal affairs reps in a small interview room. One wall had a clock. The other had a mirror he was sure was two-way. A laminated poster above his head read, Accountability builds trust. He didn't speak much. The footage had already spoken for him. Later that night, the airline issued a statement, short, professional, and direct. We do not tolerate bias, discrimination, or misuse of authority in any form. The incident involving Ms. Aaliyah Harper is being thoroughly reviewed in coordination with airport security leadership. Aaliyah's phone buzzed again. Messages were pouring in from friends who'd seen the clip, others from numbers she didn't recognize. A few were congratulatory. A couple were angry. You're going to get reactions from both sides, Jonathan said calmly. That's the nature of truth. It makes people uncomfortable. Within days, Aaliyah's story rippled far beyond the airport walls. Social media buzzed with clips of her calm defiance, sparking conversations that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. Messages flooded her inbox, not just from friends and family, but from strangers sharing their own stories of bias, suspicion, and quiet resilience. Nurses from other cities reached out, single mothers shared their fears. Flight attendants admitted to similar humiliations, and even a retired Marine thanked her for standing tall when many would have been silenced. The hashtag #StandWithAliyah trended, a rallying cry for dignity and respect in places where too often those things are overlooked. Locally, community leaders called for reform. Town halls were scheduled. Workshops on implicit bias and customer service at airports gained momentum. Conversations that once felt uncomfortable became necessary and urgent. Even those who had initially doubted her found themselves reconsidering, because Aaliyah wasn't just a symbol. She was a mirror reflecting a truth many had ignored. At Baldwin Hills Community Center, a crowd gathered for a public forum on racial profiling. The mayor spoke solemnly about accountability. Parents clutched their children's hands a little tighter. Young adults nodded, ready to challenge the status quo. Yet with progress came resistance. Online commentators debated fiercely. Is this just another example of rich kid privilege? Some asked skeptically. Or is it about a woman refusing to be erased regardless of her background? Others fired back. Some questioned whether the presence of her powerful father overshadowed the real issue that such incidents happen every day to those without influence. Through it all, Aaliyah remained focused not on the noise, but on the change her story could inspire. Jonathan stood by her side, reminding her that sometimes shaking the foundation requires making a little noise, and sometimes it's the quiet strength that shifts the deepest roots. The airport began rolling out new training protocols. Officers were reminded that every passenger, regardless of ticket class or last name, deserves respect. And though one story doesn't end systemic injustice, it lights the way for countless others to find their voices and their strength. The evening settled softly over their Baldwin Hills home. The city lights twinkled distantly through the window, but inside the quiet was intimate, a refuge from the storm of the day. Aaliyah sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands folded in her lap, eyes reflecting both weariness and quiet pride. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by a heaviness that comes after standing tall for so long. Jonathan entered the room carrying 2 cups of tea. He sat beside her without a word, offering the warm comfort of presence over empty reassurances. After a moment, Aaliyah spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, sometimes I wonder if I'm enough, if standing calm and steady really changes anything." Jonathan looked at her with the depth of a lifetime spent leading others through darkness. "You are more than enough," he said gently. "Strength isn't just the loudest voice or the hardest fight. It's knowing when to hold ground and when to lean on those who walk beside you." She nodded, drawing a slow breath. "I was scared," she admitted. "Not because I doubted myself, but because I worried about what it meant for you, for our family." Jonathan reached out, brushing a braid behind her ear with a tenderness that belied his commanding presence. "Your fight is my fight," he said softly. "And no matter what happens, I'm here. We're here." They sat together in the quiet glow of the room, 2 souls intertwined by love, resilience, and the unspoken promise to keep standing no matter the cost. What you just witnessed is more than a single encounter. It's a reflection of the countless moments where dignity and respect are still fought for every day. Aaliyah's courage shows us that strength isn't always loud or explosive. Sometimes it's the quiet confidence that refuses to be diminished. If this story moved you, inspired you, or opened your eyes, please support these voices that matter. Like this video to stand with those who demand respect. Comment below and share your thoughts or experiences. How do we change a world that still judges by appearances? Subscribe to Soulful Stories of 4 for more stories that reveal truth, resilience, and the power of standing tall.